You got to be just fast enough to still beat all your athletes.
Most of them, yeah. I haven't had an athlete beat me yet. There was one last year that probably would have, but season ended prematurely.
You tripped him.
I did. I did.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Coaches on Couches.
Being slouches.
You weren't ready for that, were you?
I was not ready for that.
Well, there it was.
Yeah.
We're here with a soon-to-be slouch.
Soon-to-be slouch. New BPC coach, Aaron Persinger.
Or Persinger.
Or Persinger.
Any of those work.
We'll be talking to Aaron today a little bit about himself and how we go about developing youth speed. So if you've got a youth runner or athlete in general, you'll definitely want to listen up and see what we've got to say today. Before that happens, I'm Coach Dale Sanford.
I am Coach Bryant Funston. We are the co-founders of BPC Performance Coaching, where we specialize in helping time-crunched athletes optimize their busy schedules so they can maximize their athletic performance. Every BPC coach is trained in our 5 pillars coaching system that has been developed over the last 11 years through our work with athletes of all ages and ability levels, from fresh off the couch to world championship competitors. You can find out more about BPC by going to buildpeakcompete.com, checking Facebook and YouTube at Build Peak Compete, or all upon that Instagram at BPC Performance, and Twitter at BPC Performance.
You can check Twitter. We went dark on Twitter.
Do people still do Twitter?
I think it's mostly people my age doing it for memes and jokes. But
yeah.
Gotcha. And you can find us on Snapchat at
what?
Yeah,
at Aaron Persinger.
It's a BPC TikTok and
yeah. Also at Aaron Persinger.
Actually, we need to go look at those first. Do not go to those.
Yeah. Yeah. Fake accounts. All right. So before we get on to talking to Aaron here, we've got shout outs.
Yeah, big shout out to, we talked about House of Pain kind of before our last podcast we did. We're at biggest class ever, right around 80 folks in our House of Pain program, working on technique, efficiency, and a lot of folks jazzed up to really perform or do what they need to this winter to perform at a high level come March. So we're excited to have that group. It's going to help keep everyone motivated. So shout out to all of our hop cycling folks. We're happy to have you and looking forward to seeing those gains from you.
Yeah, if you have any interest in jumping in, we've had some people jump in late, no problem there.
Everything's recorded.
Hopcycling.com.
Yep.
Coach Heather, we'll just throw her in there on the shout outs. Had her best all-time 5 in 20-minute during our first initial FTP test of the season.
So power numbers, yep.
Yeah, power numbers are up.
Same with Lee Rustin, also peak 5 and 20-minute numbers.
Awesome. It's always awesome to see, like, at the beginning of at the beginning of hop, knowing that by the end it's going to be, a solid 10% higher.
Yeah, it should be more. Yeah, for sure. Lee also had her peak 60 all time, 60-second all time number yesterday.
Yeah,
we were testing it
on a Thursday.
Yep, we were testing it. Or wait, no, 2 days ago. Sorry, Wednesday. So good work, Lee. Keep on rocking.
I shout out to the Professional Triathletes Organization for putting on Challenge Daytona. They did an awesome job with it. The coverage was awesome. The course was awesome. It really gives these professional especially the ones that haven't been able to really do any racing this year, an opportunity to kind of make a living out of the sport. And congrats to Gustav Eden and Paul Finley for taking the wins, $100K each.
Not a bad payday.
It was like a $1.1 million prize purse. Everyone got paid, basically. If you got invited to go, you were going to get paid.
We did not get invited.
I didn't get the invite, but
maybe it's still in the mail. It might have
it could be in the mail. I have not checked the snail mail in a while. I think that's where they delivered it.
We'll work on that.
Or maybe it was on Twitter. Maybe they delivered it to us on Twitter. We just didn't see it.
We'll give
Shout out as well, St. Jude Virtual happened. Our very own Aaron Persinger knocked out his first ever half marathon.
Oh, well, knocked it out.
He knocked out the first 11 miles.
We'll get into why. We'll get into the why.
But congrats to everyone for supporting a great cause.
Yeah.
Driving around last Saturday, I saw people all over the place with they had their bib numbers on, like they were out there knocking it out on their own, which can be tough to do. Not having the motivation of a big group and a big event, but people still showed up. So good work to all of you.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so let's jump into it. So we've got Aaron on the couch today. We brought Aaron on to mainly work initially with our youth athletes and some of our adult athletes. Aaron I would say he's overqualified to do this.
Not to be on the couch.
No. Aaron has a master's degree in human performance and exercise science from the University of Memphis. Mm-hmm. He's worked with Max Paquette in the biomechanics lab and everything, the human performance lab over there. Also has a CSCS strength and conditioning certification. So really has a ton of education.
Ran track in college as well.
Yeah, so
we'll get into that.
Yeah, so let's just real quick go into I just kind of blew through your education, but go through as far as education, and then get a little bit into your sporting background because you're coming from a track background, run hurdles, Division I hurdles, and and then kind of get into your coaching experience.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll start with education. As you both know, I did my undergrad and my master's at the University of Memphis.
Whoop, go Tigers.
Go Tigers. 2018 was my bachelor's. It seems silly to say it this way, but I was top of my class, summa cum laude, university honors with thesis. And then had so much fun, went back for 2 more years, got my master's, finished that in May. So
he didn't want to grow up.
Nerd alert.
Not ready.
Yeah.
Was not ready to grow up, so went back, and then like everybody, just kind of been putting it together since the world came kind of ground to a halt. But in my undergrad, I was a collegiate hurdler. I dabbled a little bit in the sprints, but definitely more of a hurdler. I peaked. I made an academic All-American in 2016. It's probably my best year in the 400 hurdles. I think last time I checked, I was top 5 in the 60 hurdles and the 400 hurdles, maybe. That'll probably get fact-checked by somebody, but at one point I was... Yeah,
fake news.
Call me out. But yeah, so that was my academic and athletic background at Memphis. Enjoyed it a lot. Not so much of a sprinter anymore. A little too old to be sprinting that fast, I think.
It's not true.
No, it's not true.
Too old.
It's not true. I still enjoy getting out there every now and then, but I mean, as you heard earlier, been doing a little bit of dabbling in some distance.
You got to be just fast enough to still beat all your athletes.
Most of them, yeah. I haven't had an athlete beat me yet. There was one last year that probably would have, but season ended prematurely.
You tripped him.
I did. I did. I wasn't ready yet. Too much of an ego.
We're actually, once this podcast is over, we're gonna be doing a competition in the cul-de-sac here.
Cove
between the 3 of us.
Foot race.
Foot race in the cove. Not really. We're not gonna do that.
Yeah. So you growing up, did you play multiple sports, or were you just drawn to track?
So I was actually, the very first sport I played was baseball. I played in my grandmother's backyard with her and my grandpa. She'd pitch and I'd swing, and it's probably not a surprise to anybody.
She was a regular Nolan Ryan. That's why you chose.
No, I was batting about 990, so started playing baseball for a little bit. Did not like striking out. I had a real problem with I'd cry every time I struck out, so I switched to running because I was really fast. So that's how I got into track. So I did football, swim, and track through high school. Was decent at football. 1 too many concussions. Kind of ended that career for me.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Did not really enjoy swimming beyond about 100 yards. So that kind of ended that for me, and that kind of lent itself to track.
So just so everyone knows, we have a grand plan to get Aaron into cycling and/or triathlon in the near future.
We're just gonna throw the "and" in there.
Yeah, the fact that he has a swimming background gives him a distinct advantage in triathlon. So you just wait for it. It's coming.
I'm ready. Sprint triathlon. Sprint triathlon.
Start somewhere.
Super duper sprint triathlon.
They have those too.
Go super short.
Yeah. 100 meter swim, 200 meter bike, 50 meter run.
So in college you focused on hurdles. Like, what was the longest?
The longest
like hurtling event?
400 hurdles. 400 hurdles.
Is it true that's the most miserable event in track and field?
I've
heard it's close.
That's a big debate that you're.
That and the 800 I've heard are
that's a
from
can
a
of
suffer
worms,
and
man.
pain standpoint.
I always enjoyed the 400 hurdles more than the 800 because at least you have 10 hurdles, so it's almost like a checkpoint. Like, okay, that one's done, that one's done, that one's done, that one's done. You got almost little, like
Gotcha.
It's broken down. The
Yeah.
800 just the gun goes off and it's just, man, this sucks.
Just suffer.
So
Suffer.
I
Yeah.
think the 800's worse, but I was better at the 400 hurdles, so I think that might have played a role
Gotcha.
too. It wasn't when you're good at something, it's not as bad.
So were you better at the start, like acceleration stuff, or were you better kind of later in the event?
So it's the weirdest thing. When I first started, I was a really strong finisher my freshman year and the start of my sophomore year. And then after I tore my hamstring my sophomore year, it flipped once I recovered. It flipped and I was really good at the start, and then I would kind of more hang on. So I could get up to the first hurdle with anybody, but it was hurdles 9 and 10 to the finish.
Gotcha.
It was like, I'm not quite there with some of the big dogs.
Gotcha.
Now in that recovery from the hamstring, did you put in a lot more like time in the gym? Did you focus on acceleration or anything like that, or it's just kind of how it went?
I had to completely change my running mechanics. I had a tendency to overstride a little bit, and so I think because I was overstriding, that would slow down my start a little bit. And then I think in fixing that, I had better foot placement for the start, so I was able to accelerate to the first hurdle a little better.
Yeah, for sure. So like what I have an idea, but what drew you to like human performance as far as your education goes? Because you spent a lot of years.
I did.
Doing that.
Basically what happened is when I got to school, I was going to be a biomedical engineer. And then I was like, that doesn't sound too exciting to me, so I switched to physics. And then I
do love physics.
It's very interesting, very interesting. But
and applies to
it's
biomechanics.
pretty similar. But what happened was the Monday after I tore my hamstring, I was crutching to my physics class. It was like a half a mile crutch, and I was like a quarter of the way there. I was going to be like 5 minutes late because you can't move very fast in crutches. And I was just like, man, this sucks. Like, this is not fun. My life is not fun right now. And it got me thinking, like, what is fun? And kind of as I was rehabbing, I was thinking about it's interesting to learn about what's going on in my body to do that recovery process. And once I'm recovered, how am I going to get better? And I spent a lot of time listening to my coach instead of just listening to what he had to say as it related to me improving my event. And that kind of got me interested in human performance and kind of figuring out, why does running repeat 200s with 30 seconds rest versus 60 seconds rest? Like, what's the difference there? So kind of learning a little bit about the energy systems that supply ATP and all that kind of stuff is kind of what got me into it and into human performance.
Awesome. So briefly, what was your thesis or your project on?
So my undergraduate thesis was on how leucine supplementation affects cancer cachexia in mice. And then,
did you get that?
So cachexia basically, like when people get cancer, they lose a lot of muscle, like disproportionate to people that don't exercise.
Okay.
So cachexia is the accelerated muscle atrophy. And so the theory at the time was that if you give leucine, one of the branched chain amino acids, it is known to kind of stimulate muscle protein synthesis. So the theory was maybe that can help. And like most things in science, the results said it might, to put it kind of simply.
It depends.
It depends, exactly. It depends. Maybe it
my
depends.
favorite answer.
Yeah. And then in grad school, so intermittent fasting was really popular kind of at the time. And so we looked at how a variant of intermittent fasting called time-restricted feeding, if you're healthy and exercise, how does that work? Because the evidence that it's good if you're overweight, obese, trying to, cut down on fat is pretty well supported.
Restrict calories. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But how it worked in healthy individuals, it was a little unknown. So we took some mice and had some of them do time-restricted feeding, 2 different time windows, and then one group that just ate whenever they felt like it. And at least from our results, it seemed like it was, again, it kind of just depends, not as beneficial for the healthy individual. These were mice, but not as beneficial because you're already healthy. We gave them a good diet. They were exercising 5 days a week. So
Gotcha. There was that one study that came out recently about they tested cyclists and had some fasting, doing intermittent fasting, basically skipping breakfast, and others were not, and they found that skipping breakfast, basically intermittent fasting, was inhibiting or like hurting afternoon performance in cycling. So I think I
think a lot of that, you got to kind of think about what's your goal. Like, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to slim down? Are you trying to lose weight? Is that more of an important factor than performance on the bike or performance within your specific sport? And then fuel yourself accordingly, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. So, all right. So we'll get into the main topic here, which is, it's developing youth speed, but this really applies to pretty much everyone. I mean, you might be further along this path than others, but, as far as we go about developing speed in anyone, this is the path we choose to take. The thing with youth athletes is they don't have a choice. When the coach is directing the program, the youth athlete doesn't necessarily have a choice on what they're doing. Whereas when we work with adults and they have their say in some things, it tends to jump around a lot more versus going in the phases that work the best to make the actual improvements stick. So first off, like when we take on a new athlete, we always assess them, figure out like what are the major things that'll move the needle right away. It's usually the same stuff for the most part, especially with young runners and stuff like that. But the main thing that we focus on is movement and not working. We are in no way, shape, or form worried about how many miles they're putting in, how much training duration they're putting in. We're literally trying to get them to move better. I mean, there's you can't learn. You're not going to go faster and get more efficient without learning it slower and learning the movements first. So
learn to move first and then go faster. After that, work on speed post.
So what are some of the things that you would focus on movement wise in like a new runner, whether it be distance or even track?
Yeah, so I mean the big one is kind of near and dear to my heart because it's what I had to fix for myself is foot position, because if you're too far in front, too far behind, kind of helping with that transition of step to step, breaking between steps, making sure that you're helping yourself out, not slowing yourself down and putting certain musculature in danger. That's kind of one of the easier ones for me to notice because I had to go through that myself.
Oh, for sure.
And then another big one is making sure that you're not overstriding or understriding, which is similarly related, but making sure that you've got a good tempo. You're not turning over so much that you look like a bird walking or like a hummingbird flapping its wings. Getting a little bit of power out of it. So those are kind of the two ones that I like to focus on, because if you can have your foot be in the right position and have it be on the ground for the right amount of time, a lot of the other things tend to come along. So the way you cycle your leg through, if you're spending too much time on the ground, you have to do something with that leg. So it's going to cycle longer versus if you can get that foot back off the ground, it'll kind of help you rotate your swing leg through in a better way.
Speed is a combination of like your RPM, like your leg turnover, and your distance per stride. And so if you can be going the same exact speed and you can have a longer stride stride length and quicker turnover, or the opposite. You can have the same speed, but there's that range of that diminishing returns where when the stride length goes out too long, you're overstriding and you're basically what we call front side contact. You're getting out in front of your center of mass and actually creating rearward force. So like
and
you're
that
saying,
foot's staying on the ground so much longer,
right?
Too, so that cadence actually decreases.
So focusing on decreasing ground contact time, in doing that, we focus a lot on teaching athletes like how to utilize that stretch shortening cycle that happens in the lower leg muscles to get off the ground quicker. And for us, that's
go into stretch shortening cycle just real quick for those that may be listening to this and go, "What the heck is that?"
You want to take that?
Man, put me on the spot. I forgot.
Yeah. So realistically, all it is like the way I explain it easily is that your muscles are like rubber bands, and when a muscle is in a stretch phase, it can then recoil. It stores energy, and then it can recoil, and that in turn can help you get off the ground quicker because it's not necessarily a muscular contraction that's taking place. It's just a transition of energy.
It's like a recoil, yeah.
Yeah. And so, like, if you think about it, and this is like the analogy I use all the time. It's like if you take your finger and you move your finger as fast as you possibly can.
For those of you watching live,
yeah.
Dale's not moving it very fast.
Not as fast.
Try it at home. Try this at home, folks.
If you just flick your finger, and then if you actually take your finger and pull it back and you let it go, it's going to move so much faster than you could ever make it happen on your own with muscle contraction. So we try to teach people first thing is learning how to use that stretch shortening cycle in the lower body to decrease ground contact time. The saying is big force, short time. The shorter you're on the ground, the more force you're going to put to the ground. So that's huge. And then like you said, like reducing front side contact, which is basically what you're talking about, is making sure that you're not overstriding, is huge. I mean, it's like I call it speed enemy number one. If you're producing force backwards, it is not helping you
go forward. Nope.
So everything is a matter of foot placement, and that determines your direction of force. So yeah, it's huge. And if those things aren't in place, like you can increase strength and you can increase leg turnover, but the improvements in speed are going to be limited because you're still putting force in the wrong direction. So yeah, that's huge. Foot placement. I
would say just when you ask most people to try to run faster, most people in their mind think, I need to step further. Mm-hmm. And this is something, goes exactly in line with what you guys are saying. But most people we work with, adult and youth, to go faster, it seems like people want to reach more. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm going to make it all happen on the front side, when really a lot of it happens on the back side. Yeah. So parent at home, if you're watching your kid, pay attention. Are they really trying to reach way far out? How slow is their turnover? I mean, those are two things that we tend to correct right away. Thinking more about stuff happening under and behind as opposed to reaching to try to go faster.
Yeah, and realistically, in this phase of training, this movement phase of training, you're breaking down the stride cycle into shorter movements, and we're doing it slow at first, and we're teaching that movement so that those muscles are activating that movement and doing the job they're supposed to when they're supposed to. Learn it slow, and then you can start to add speed to it. Mm-hmm. But if you don't ever break it down and you're just trying to explain the whole stride cycle to a youth athlete, you're going to blow, their brain's going to go.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just going to look at you like you have two heads. So you have to break it down into smaller portions, keep it slow, and sometimes you may actually have to move them through that portion of the stride cycle and then add speed. I would say one thing, and this is probably the most common, and you probably, having worked with like high school and stuff like that, one of the things that is most common that we see is just terrible body position.
Oh yeah.
I mean, and you can float like arm action and stuff like that into that, but like having poor body position again goes back to direction of force. We're limiting how much force we're going to put backwards to propel ourselves forward. So if you're constantly hunched over, or you're not rigid in your upper body, and you have floppy arms and all this stuff, there's going to be a very large diminish of the force that you're working so hard to create.
Yeah.
That kind of goes into the second part, which is strength training.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, how would you say, like, how would you go about working on strength training with a youth athlete? Because it really goes like body position here. If you're not strong enough, you're never going to be able to hold on to those body positions. So it's kind of a chicken or the egg thing.
Yeah.
We kind of have to do them simultaneously a bit. But how would you necessarily go about working with a younger athlete on strength?
Well, it's so cliche, but you got to make sure they do the movement right first. It doesn't, obviously the younger they are, the less the load is important, but no matter how old you are, it's important to do it correctly, because if I tell you, hey, let's do some back squats, get a full range of motion, and you can get your hamstrings to your calves, but you're on your toes, your back looks like a capital C, it's not as good. Like you said, it's harder to kind of chain the force together, and it's not as good for your joints versus if you're able to be, nice and vertical, keep everything in a good position. It's like a slinky. If you push a slinky down the stairs normally, it's going to go down. But if I go through your slinky and like wrinkle up every other, little spring roll that there is, it's not going to go down as well. It's kind of the same thing with loading the movements. If you're impressing everybody and, you're back squatting 500 pounds, but it's because your back is lining up being parallel to the ground, all you're doing is putting yourself in danger. You're not even really doing the movement correctly.
Yeah.
So,
you're limiting the work that the muscles you're actually trying to work are doing.
Exactly. And that's what we see so much, is that you can use strength training to help learn, like these muscles learn when to fire, how to fire, and fire more forcefully if you're doing it right. Mm-hmm. If you take someone, it's kind of like you don't go fast first, learn the mechanics, learn the movement first, just like you do with the running side of things. Same thing with strength, because that stuff's going to carry over into your running. Learning to do something wrong and then trying to load up weight or load up speed, you're just moving a lot faster towards hurting yourself or having major problems down the road. So
what I'm gathering is with a new athlete, we take them, load up a bar, and have them do snatch right away. Heavy snatch right away.
Single leg snatch, preferably. Yeah,
absolutely.
Single leg snatch.
That's a great idea. Yeah, so I mean, you have to...
That was a joke, everybody.
Yeah,
that was a joke.
For those of you who haven't got that. So focus on the movement. You're going to hear this again and again and again with the youth athlete. Focus on the movement. Make sure that you're going through an optimal range of motion. You don't have to get your butt to the ground on a squat. Even if you can get your heels keep your heels on the ground, you don't have to get your butt on the ground, that kind of thing. But going through an optimal range of motion makes sure that the joints are also capable of doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And then you're also, you're triggering all the surrounding muscle groups to work as well.
And I think that's a huge aspect of it too, and something that's neglected. When we assign someone strength training, having the eyes there initially to actually watch a person or watch a youth especially go through this is so key, because you can see like what is actually happening to their knees when they're doing it. From a side view, it may look like everything is groovy, right? But once you start looking how all these joints are interacting in space, you can determine, whether a child is putting themselves at risk. And a lot of times that's going to carry over into their run mechanics also. Yep. So you can help identify potential injury spots, muscle groups that there may be imbalances, firing orders that may be off. But by being there and having eyes on a kid to actually see them go through those movement patterns, you can tell, like knees squeezing in tends to be a huge thing with youth. On the up part of a squat. Yeah. Like you'll see those knees dive. So why is that? And how do you cue them? And what auxiliary muscle groups may be weak that help support the knee? So kind of bringing all this into rounding out a good training program for youth. And all this applies to adults as well. We see it with adults all the time too.
I can't stand, like, it pains me every time I see a youth athlete like wearing a knee brace or something like that. It's like one, you shouldn't be like wearing a knee brace unless there's a serious injury there. But it could have so easily, unless it was an impact injury, been prevented just with some simple, even just simple basic body weight strength training and muscle activation exercises. You can do a lot with a little in regards with youth especially, and it's just so ignored.
And the reason why it pains us is because if you're using a brace as a preventative measure, like that's where we're not in agreement at all. Like as soon as you brace something up, you're now having this mechanical device that's becoming your stabilizer as opposed to what you should be doing, which is
taking care of the muscle groups
right.
that are going to stabilize that joint.
As soon as you use that brace, it's there forever. You're never going to train the muscle to do what it's supposed to do if you put the brace on from the start.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. And so, like, in doing the strength training, we're targeting, we're targeting the dominant movements again. So we're training the movement and not necessarily the muscle. So we're training the dominant movement, the muscles in the movements, and the movements in sport, so that we can get those muscle groups. But we also, like we just said, have to target those stabilizer groups. Mm-hmm. And that's, again, like people will get into strength training and they'll get their kid doing squats and deadlifts and whatever else. But the kid never moves laterally, never does anything laterally. And so you'll still see, like we just said, on that concentric portion of a squat, the knees are just diving in because the lateral hip muscles are so weak. They're not stabilizing the knee joint. And so when they get out and you watch them run, if you watch them run from a front profile, every time their foot makes contact with the ground, their knee dives in. And, and they're wondering, like, the kid does squats, the kid does this, but they're still getting like IT band issues and stuff like that. They have the weak hips. It's weak hips. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, it's totally worth doing. I think the ideals of strength training for youth athletes have come a long way in the last 10 years.
Really quick for the parent or even a coach. Coach is working with youth athletes. Age group. We get a question quite a bit, like, what age is my child too young to start lifting weights? Like, fill in the people at home or those listening as far as age ranges.
Well, from what I've read, obviously, like, you're not going to take a baby that obviously can barely stand and give him a bar and say, "Hey, go get him." But
I did.
But everything that I've read, it seems that as long as they're moving properly, like, obviously you're not going to have your kid try and do like 4 times body weight deadlifts, but as long as you take them safely through a progression, start with a PVC pipe or start with body weight, light loads, just body weight loads, move properly, they're going to be okay. Like, you can take them through, put them through a back squat, make sure they're doing all those movements correctly with just a PVC pipe. Maybe you give them like a light bar, but as long as they're doing the movements correctly, they're not going to put themselves in any huge danger. Quite the opposite. In fact, as we were talking about, all the benefits from all of that.
For sure. Yeah, we've worked with kids as early as 5 or 6.
Yeah.
I mean, we work with some young kids.
Yeah.
And they're actually, like, kids' brains are so easy. They pick up so much faster than adults tend to. So teaching a kid to move properly early is so much easier than trying to teach an adult to move properly after they've had years and years and years of this pre-programming in their brain. And that's like swimming. When Aaron was telling us how he swam in high school, Dale's like, huh? You swam? He's like, man, we can make a triathlete out of you for sure.
That's right.
Because, that's a very technique-specific thing,
technique
right?
demanding
So
to the max.
Kids learn it much faster than adults. Like, I haven't drowned my kid yet, and she's little. Sink or swim. But, like, they're able to adapt. They're able to learn that movement pattern so fast. If you teach a kid how to move properly early on, and strength training is a great way to do that because it slows it down. Like, they're learning the mechanics, and it's in a slowed down form. and they can learn which muscle group should be firing and when, they're going to be so far ahead. Not just from like I'm a high performing athlete, just from moving.
Yeah, from a health standpoint.
They've been. I mean, it's been shown that like in that, even like pre-puberty phase, their brains are so much easily wired for movement than post-puberty, because the myelin sheaths or whatever you want to go into that stuff on the brain. It's so much easier to get them to learn and for have it to stick.
Yeah, I mean, you can see it if half the adults that I'm sure that you both have worked with, you try and teach them how to hinge. Push your hips back, and the first thing they do is round their back. And am I doing it right?
Yeah.
I mean, even with the high schoolers that I help coach, it's like, all right, we're going to work on hinging. And I say the word, and they're like, doing what now? I'm like, yeah, you're going to push your hips back, and the first thing they want to do is bend their knees. It's like, no, like the joint right here, your hips, they can move independent of your knees.
Exactly. Yeah.
And trying to get them to do that, let alone some of the adults that you see at a gym that their deadlift is pretty much just a back squat, but they're holding the bar in front instead of behind. I mean, that's a big one, that if you can teach your kid how to like push their hips back properly. I mean,
hip hinge? Oh, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely. All right, so we'll move a little bit ahead. So after, you're focused on the movement, we're focused on strength training, we're focused on the movement there still. Once those movement patterns are pretty solidified, and you've done some strength training, some basic strength training like that, movements are solid there, that would be the point where we would go into what we call strengthening the movement. And that's kind of where like we pull out the toys and we work with like resisted running and sleds and parachutes and all that fancy stuff. But that it's not until those movements are solid, because at that point you're adding resistance to poor movements, and you're just repeating poor movements and
accelerating the time that it's going to take to injury.
Right. Yeah. Practice makes permanent. So if you're practicing constantly poor movement patterns, you're going to set them in, and even if you're doing that under load or under resistance, you're just making it worse. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of like the third phase, and we don't really have to go in real deep into that, but
what would you say? So I know like we use a lot of these fun stuff, which does have a good use. What would you say for, and this is open for both of you guys here, but for a person who doesn't have access, doesn't have a parachute, doesn't have a sled, doesn't have trays, like what could a person use that they can maybe find, in their area, around their house, in their neighborhood? Like how can you teach some of this speed development stuff without the use of those toys?
Yeah, I mean, one of the easiest things is a hill. That is nature's toy right there. I mean, how many kids have you seen? Like, I'm sure when you were kids, you just go play on a hill, right? I mean, you can run up a hill and it's resisted running. Yep. You go down a hill, it's assisted running.
Overspeed, yeah.
I mean, so if you have a hill or stairs, a stadium, I mean, any kind of incline will give you that kind of nature's toy, if you will. It's not as exciting to put on social media as like a parachute is, but it's the same benefit. It's
for sure.
A resisted run. It's good mechanics. It's an increased load because of gravity. So it's strengthening movement in every way. And I mean, unless if you're very unlucky, there's hills everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Sorry for those of you who live outside of Houston.
Yeah.
Find an overpass.
In the Delta.
In the Delta, yes.
Yeah, I mean, that was gonna be my first answer, because that's the first place we take once the kid gets to this. Even before we pull out the toys, it's always fun to use those things, and they get psyched up about using that kind of the equipment. But take them to a hill, and if they can still perform the movement on a hill, then it's totally worth getting the other stuff out.
And one thing we tend to see is like when you're doing this stuff, it's so easy, like especially with hill stuff, or even using the toy stuff. A kid gets a strap put around their waist, and we'll see it all the time, and cue a kid all the time on that resistance hits them, and now their mechanics go to down, like go south, because they're letting that resistance now fold their body, and now ground contact's funky. So anytime you start even using hills, doing overspeed stuff on downhills, you want to make sure form, technique,
always
body
at the forefront.
position is number one. So we're not getting to a hill and we're like, let's see how fast you can get up that hill.
With your head tucked.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Shoulders
So
rounded.
if you take nothing else from this podcast we're doing, mechanics first, drill mechanics, whether it's strength, whether it's technique work as far as running. If you're doing assisted or resisted running, first off, focus on that technique. Make sure body position is good. Make sure movement patterns are right, and then work on increasing the intensity.
Well, and it's kind of a silly way for me to explain it to the guys that I coach, but I like to tell them, pretend somebody's watching, whether it's, whoever you want to date or somebody's going to put this on social media, pretend it's being filmed, because nobody wants to put them running with a sled and, they're hunched over and it looks like they're trying to tie their shoes at the same time. They want to look good. So I always tell them,
legs are flinging out.
Pretend I'm going to film this and put it on the team's social media, because then you're going to do everything properly because you want to look good.
Yeah.
And the reason that it looks good is because it's the right way to do it. And so that gives them another kind of cue for, oh, this is something cool, but I need to make sure I'm doing it right because I want to look good.
Yeah.
And that's why most of us work out. We want to look good. So
that's why I do my hip work.
Yeah.
I'm working on #1 set of hips in Memphis.
That's that is a really good cue especially for kids this day and age.
Especially for old dinosaurs like us, Dale. We're relating stuff to social media now.
We're going to put this on MySpace. We're putting this on MySpace.
Poor Aaron doesn't even know what MySpace is.
So the last bit, and there's no secret here. Once everything's solid, even if you're working on strengthening the movement, we do have to practice fast running. I mean, if you're gonna go faster, you got to run fast. And this is something it amazes me, even especially with adults that come to us and they're, we take a look over what they've been doing anytime we take on a new athlete, and they're just like, I've been kind of plateaued for the last 2-3 years, and the two things we find, especially with runners, is one, they never run fast. Or two, they never take time off. They never rest. So we're just piling on a bunch of miles expecting ourselves to get faster, and we never actually get faster. So you do have to practice fast running. Speed work, quote unquote, speed work can be also movement based. And you are moving faster, but we have to take that, what I would call speed skills, and then eventually it has to go into a structured, speed training of trying to hit different, intervals or whatever, however you want to break it down, at specific paces. And we have to have those paces be structured based on your present fitness and not
your desired.
Yes. Yeah.
And one thing to always pay attention to when you're doing that, one thing we always tell our athletes, whether it's a cyclist or, a runner or even a swimmer, once you feel as though technique is falling apart, that's when you need to say, okay, this workout maybe needs to end, or I need to increase my recovery time between. I mean, obviously there's a goal to every workout, but if you start to feel, especially at high intensity levels, that you're sacrificing your technique in order to get one more interval in, that's where, a person probably needs to start thinking about, what's my goal here? What's the risk reward? And maybe is it time for me to shut down my effort?
Yeah. Do you see it a lot with the high school age where you just have a really hard time getting them to slow down? They just always want to go fast, or are they cool?
Or is it the opposite?
Yeah.
It kind of depends in that, if I tell them, hey, we're going to do 460s today, they're like, okay, I can run this fast. But as soon as I say, hey, we're going to do a 500, and then we're going to do 1 500 today, they're just like, well, I can't run a 500 fast. Even though, let's say we have a kid that can run a 52-second 400. If I tell him, hey, let's come through at 55, and then you just hang on. In his head, he's not thinking, okay, that's only 100 meters that I have to hang on for. It's more in his head, oh, I have to run almost my PR, even though in a scheme of 400s, 3 seconds is a pretty significant jump. So it's it's a little bit of both. Sometimes I'm telling hey, this is a full speed day, we're just moving quick. I just want you to get from point A to point B as fast as you can. Don't think about anything. Just go here to here. And I can still see them trying to turn the wheels. And it's like, hey, don't no wheel turning today. As soon as you hear the whistle, we're going. And some of the guys, it's the exact opposite. They can either go or they can't go. It's like, hey, we're going to run 6 200s. I'm going to give you a minute rest. So obviously don't run them full speed. And they still, the time gap won't be like a half a second. It'll be, hey, we'll go 23, 24, 24, 29, 40. And then I just turn the clock off because it's like, I don't want to say it out loud. So it's interesting that it kind of depends on the kid in that case.
And that would be a very last important thing. Like, as a coach, you need to know your athlete, right? And it's not one program for everybody. And I think that's, the way we've essentially run this business, and the way this business really focuses is on, we need to meet an individual where they're at, and we need to know what works best for them. And so much is in the head. Like, there's so much mental part in performance in general. And that's what I love about endurance sports, is so much is mental.
Yeah.
But meeting a person and knowing that person and knowing how to get the most out of each individual person is what I feel separates, a really good coach from someone who, maybe isn't as good at getting as much as they can out of every athlete that they interact with.
I mean, it's like you guys were saying, it's all relative, right? Like, for me, I'm sure you coach plenty of people. There's probably people listening that, if they heard my half marathon pace, they're like, oh, that's like a slow, easy run pace. And for me, it was like red line. Like,
do you want to tell the people at home?
8 minute miles until mile 11.
I think it's not to jump topics here, but I think it's interesting, coming from a track background and jumping into in a more endurance sport. It's still it's a shock to the system.
Yeah, what'd you say when we first were chatting with you about it? You're like, that's a different kind of pain.
It is a different kind of pain. Like, the acidic burn from a 400 hurdle or an 800, like, that sucks. But when I hit mile 11 and I could not lift I looked like my grandfather. Like, I had my feet, like, whole lower leg externally rotated. Like, I was hunched over, back rounded.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my goodness. I could barely walk. And I had 2 miles to go. It was... It got...
In all fairness, you said you started getting focused on your St. Jude virtual that you were doing
early
in October,
early
right?
October, yeah. 4 days a week.
You gave yourself
running.
2 months.
4 days a week running, 3 days a week lifting.
Coming from a more sprint-based background.
Yeah. Furthest I'd gone before that was about 4 miles. So
there we go. That's funny.
Oh.
Awesome.
I mean, obviously, we're getting way off topic here, but
that's what we do, Brian.
I think that's one of the things that can be very hard. Like, some people get pacing right away, and they can get, okay, relative to how I'm suffering right now, how long can I hold this for? But we get some people that, like, I don't know if they just haven't done it enough, and you can learn it, but there's some people that initially just have no clue. Like, go out and pace yourself, and working with you, so this is great. Like, go out and try to run this pace for 400. And just getting a feel for whether or not they even know what that is without staring at a watch is huge. So many people are just so programmed, I'm going to run to this as opposed to feel. And then when you change up a distance on them, which goes back to your, like, we're going to run a 500 and I want you on this pace instead of what you normally would. And they're like,
yeah, what does that mean?
Well, and I don't know what that is. Like, I don't even know how to do that.
And I rarely tell them times because, I'm coaching 20, 30 kids. Yeah. I can't like focus on the best kids, say, hey, you're a 50-second 400 guy, so let's run these at 26 and tell the other kids, I'll just see what happens. So
stay with it as long as you can.
Yeah, just be about 10 seconds behind me. Like, what does that mean? So
exactly, yeah.
I mean, I have a watch just so I can see it. So if somebody has like a special day, I'm like, oh wow, this kid, maybe he's 8 seconds faster than I thought he was, but I try to make them go off of feel because the reality is most of these kids aren't going to run track after high school anyway. But if I can teach them something about understanding their body and they take this fitness into the next step.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's almost as important as, oh yeah, my kid got a book scholarship for track to college. Like, obviously that's great.
Yeah.
But, for every one kid that's going to happen, I'm going to have 20 or 30 that the only running they're going to do, unless if I can make running fun for them, is going to be when they're on the team, and then they're going to graduate high school, go off to college, and say, hey, man, running is stupid. I hate it. Because I didn't give them a chance to learn how they enjoyed it, which I think is equally as important as it is to develop the fast kids and get them money in college.
100%.
Definitely.
Awesome. Well, man, we're stoked to have you on the team, and you can book time with Aaron on the website now. If for those of you with youth athletes, or if you're looking for a personal trainer, he's out there for you, and we're excited to see what happens here. So we appreciate everyone hanging out, listening, watching. We will catch you guys next time.
Shout out to all the zookeepers.
Peace. Adios.